Mike, I don't know whether this will go on the podcast or not, but I'll ask anyway.
Data only tells you what's happened. It doesn't tell you, a lot of times can't tell you why. Being able to answer the why behind the what's happening and understanding why things worked or didn't work and communicating that and creating that expectation to the brand, and that's a dynamic process.
Is it fair to say that you've been working on Amazon ecosystem for about 10, 15 years?
I was a part of a project they are trying to build.
Hey everyone, this is Krishna here, co-founder CEO at Saras, and over here I oversee our product and data teams, and I have with me Mike. Mike's from Adverio. Mike, I'm super excited. This is my second time getting on a podcast and trying to record it. I'm always excited talking to folks like yourself. To me, this is an opportunity to learn and also to share that learning with the rest of the audience as well. So I'm hoping to have a great conversation today that will add value to me, hopefully to you, and also to the audience that is listening to us. Mike, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. Mike Danford here, CSO or Chief Strategy Officer for Adverio. Been in the space since 2010. Started out as a seller, doing some arbitrage, reselling Nikes, etc. And then just through that, one of my most expensive hires whenever we started doing private label was advertising. Realized it was numbers. I was like, hey, I like numbers. I can figure this out. So I started doing it for myself. And then at that time, a lot of Facebook groups were up, posting results, and others were asking if I would help them out, and they were willing to pay for it. And so the advertising agency is kind of the history from there.
Interesting. So is it fair to say that you've been working on Amazon ecosystem for about 10, 15 years now?
Yeah, since late 2014, early 2015.
Interesting. And how would you, if you were to quickly run through your journey from then to now in terms of your perspective on
Ooh,
how you think about running advertising on Amazon, and especially now with Amazon ramping up its ad products and launching new features every day.
yeah,
So
it's
anything that you can touch on how life was back then to what you think it is
absolutely.
now?
Much simpler and much cheaper in terms of clicks. 10 years ago, obviously they've developed, which has been great. They're definitely giving us more data than they used to, which is also great as well. Lot more levers to pull, and it's hard not to have shiny object syndrome because of the rate they release things.
Yeah.
And obviously AMC makes it even more complex, and like, is the juice worth the squeeze, etc. But I love where they're heading. It does seem like they're investing more in that. Obviously want to know what they can do with some seller support. It's always the lag, but as far as that, it's definitely a more interesting platform, a lot more creative. You can get more copy involved, different types of ad placements, etc. So excited to see that.
Interesting. My observation, I'd love to hear your thoughts also on this, is from the time Andy Jassy took over the roles at Amazon, I see that Amazon has been a lot more open with respect to the data that they're sharing.
Mhm.
Uh, do you see that data having a big unlock for you at Adverio?
Absolutely. Certainly, some of the back end data they'll give, at the product and keyword level and different things, they're opening up even more in the API, allowing us to do more data. Lots of things that have been around for a while on the platform, you can actually now export. You don't have to do bots or scrapes, yourself, etc. So I definitely agree with that. And, I think they're still figuring out what to do with it and what not to do. But like I said, it's a lot more data in the last year or so than we've ever seen before. Certainly with the 1P data for sure.
Interesting. And do you see that same pattern on the advertising and the seller and vendor side as well, or what's your read on it?
I think 1P is always kind of their beta where they test and give different types of sets of data, and then obviously they'll push it out to the 3P later. Um, I think they're just trying to figure out what data is important to us and doesn't really harm them in terms of giving away their competitive advantage, if you will.
Right.
And then, I think that Amazon wants to have more of the more data on their platform as always. And they've, since day one, they've lost a lot of, the advertising optimization and going into third parties, and they're trying to build their platform so you can stay on their platform more with a lot more automation, kind of like Google was. So I think that's where I see it going next. And I was a part of a project where they are trying to build a programmatic platform inside of um, sellers. Well, I guess technically inside the advertising platform as well. So we're definitely trying to bring more of that in-house so they can keep that data there.
Interesting. Just taking a step back, right? Now we see that Amazon is pivoting towards being more open, being sharing much more timely data. We see with marketing stream, they're giving intraday data to sellers. With Amazon ads, the latency of data is getting much better. The coverage of APIs that they are providing is also much broader than
Yeah.
it was the case before, both on the Amazon ads, seller, and on the vendor front. So, from your perspective, as someone running strategy at an Amazon agency, how do you think about data and its impact on the business and the decisions?
Yeah, at first it's again trying not to get over inundated, not have that shiny object syndrome when they release something, trying to understand what it is it valuable, and trying to do it at scale. It's an advantage, with an agency or someone that sees multiple brands, platforms, products, et cetera. It's kind of like, you can compare that and see what is of value. And that's definitely the hard part. Sometimes you have to just kind of do it. You have to just get in there, play around with it, see if it's worth it. And I feel like most brands really just need to focus on the basics. A lot of them are just trying to chase what's being released in the new stuff, and they're really failing on the basics, both from the data, incorporating the data, and obviously how to leverage that data and read the data. We have brands come to us that, like, hey, we want AMC and et cetera. And they want to go through and through. And I'm like, hey, you're only running sponsored products. You're not even doing brands, videos, DSP, sponsor display. So the data is, it's there, but what are you going to be able to do with it? You're not going to really have a big impact on your tactics. So I think that's the big thing to come across. And then, we work with large catalogs. So for us, a lot of, out of the box platforms they have the basics, and they'll give you the KPIs that everyone can communicate on, et cetera. But if you really want to drill down and understand, what product to go after or what products are pulling or pushing or changing over time, that's where we have to get into the custom solutions. And I think that's definitely the hard part. I think brands in the beginning, smaller brands, should just stick to an out of the box, something that's simple, straightforward, and does the heavy lifting for them. And then as they try to figure out what they are looking for, data sets they want to go after to come back that their competitive advantage or et cetera, then they can start going, because it's not just data that's coming from Amazon. There's a lot of 3P data out there. Obviously now with getting to the reviews and there's so many different data sources to come through. So it's like, what are you going to be able to what can you access, what's cost effective access, and then what can you leverage and use that data for? I think those are the questions that we have to commonly ask ourselves over and over again.
Right. I'm assuming that you didn't end up at, hey, I want a custom solution on day one. So you talked about having a large catalog,
Mhm.
and you talked about being able to analyze that large catalog, find opportunities, and use those opportunities to drive growth. But in order to surface all of those insights, you also mentioned that there is a custom tool that you guys managed to build. What I was saying was you probably didn't end up with a custom solution right off the bat, and it was probably a journey and an investment over the years. So just walk us through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, it was using Excel and VBA and kind of local data, and then it's being able to answer the why behind the what's happening is where we really started to realize, hey, we gotta dig deeper. And a lot of data providers go after data that we feel isn't as beneficial, and it's heavy and kind of muddy. And then we have our own logic that, hey, this is how we would manually go and try to root cause analysis for a product, a keyword, group of products, whatever it may be. So we want to start building those in to where you actually already have that view. As soon as you pop in, it's, hey, here's what's going on. You can go to the next level of questions from there. And now it's, we talked about this, is trying to build in, more the machine learning and AI pieces, and getting NLP and all kinds of other aspects into it to be a little more intuitive. And hey, these are the 10 checkpoints. Which one are we at? What's going on? And then now it's being more of um, proactive. Hey, we see a trend kind of going this way, favorable or unfavorable, doesn't matter. Let's take a look at this. I think you guys call it like a watchdog alert, et cetera. Very similar to that. Again, it's both sides, pros and cons, to help understand, like, hey, if it's going well, let's do more of it. Let's pump gas on it. If it's not going well, hey, why is it not? How do we fix it? And then obviously, again, working with large catalogs that can get pretty noisy and busy. So it's, hey, how do we not make it too sensitive, but sensitive enough that we have a good reaction time to it? So it's definitely, it definitely shifts. And I feel like there's endless. It's limitless. It never gonna be satisfied. There's always something new, and
Yeah.
then trying to do it at scale. And for us, it's just being able to see those trends across multiple brands, different sectors, categories, and even platforms as well. And that helps us to understand what's most beneficial at scale for all of our brands. And then we work with some, again, mid-7, mid-8 figure brands. So very established to have their own ERP. So we're trying to communicate with them. And then, their own could be on 10 different marketplaces. So it's how do we bring all that data together, and again, reduce that noise. And again, it's each brand is a little unique, but we try to build it as a, hey, we're doing it for one brand and it works really well. Let's see if we can do it for all the other brands as well. And that's kind of how after we build it for one, how do we scale it? And we also try to think about that while we're building it as well.
Interesting. Is it fair to say that at an agency you have a point of view in how you want to analyze a brand and its performance on Amazon? And your point of view then translates to a set of workflows.
Mhm.
Those set of workflows might have a set of data points that are fueling those workflows and perhaps triggering certain actions to be taken by your team. Uh, is that, am I thinking about it correctly, or uh, because I'm assuming that every agency has their own secret sauce, and that secret sauce may or may not be encapsulated into a tool that gives you something right out of the box, and you have to tweak a few levers here and there to get it in a fashion that your teams can use, right? So is that also a driving factor from a training your team perspective? And
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, if we're running beta tests, we're trying to understand data. We want to have more of an internal view first. We want to kind of filter that data. So there's a lot of things that we report on internally that we don't surface or expose externally because, again, we're trying to reduce the noise for the brands, for the end users, et cetera, that we're reporting to, especially during a trial phase or a beta phase where it's really confusing. And it's, again, to your point, we have our own POV and we're going, depending on what we are working on for the brand. Some brands we work on, primarily just to marketing, advertising, intra platform. Others will go off the platform as well. And then others will go all across the platforms, like a CMO role. And then some were on different platform, different marketplaces. And we also get into the creatives and the copy and et cetera. And that really changes, the perspective as well as, hey, we're only looking at marketing, but we'll also try to pull in other signals as well, such as pricing optimization, inventory management, et cetera. And the more that we can pull in and share what the impact is up or downstream, I think that helps us. The brand also has their POV and they're looking at certain things and they have goals. I mean, we have some brands that are, um, they're backed, right? So they have different pressure points and different timelines, et cetera, that we're going after. And we have others that have been around for decades and they're a little more patient. So it's kind of navigating that. And then how do you build that view for them? It's trying to reduce that friction for them. Hey, this is a report that we have internally. This is a
Mhm.
report that we give you. And then, hey, if they have to report to someone else, how can we help them do that and reduce that for them and paint that narrative for them? So it's definitely a collaborative process for sure.
Got it. Got it. With the solutions that you have currently in place, do you have workflows that are weaved in to the solutions where you have your teams looking at the dashboards that you have when they start their day, taking certain actions, and
Mhm.
then continue on? It would be great for me to get a perspective, both from a operational standpoint as well as from a executive standpoint in terms of how you're leveraging data.
Yeah, so we're constantly trying to standardize at least the core of our program. So we have what we call the GMAP, Growth Marketing Action Plan, and historically that's been kind of disparate and separate from our reporting and KPIs. But a lot of those questions can be answered through the reporting and the data that we have, at least on the advertising and listing management side. So we're trying to bring that in so we can obviously see that and check those. And it's always trying to get that core internally. Hey, if you do these, this is like the Pareto. If you do these 80%, I'm sorry, these, the 20% or whatever, and you'll get 80% of what you're looking for. And then it's focusing on the rest and the more manual touch and trying to figure out how to get that extra incrementality for a product or a group of products. And again, it comes down to standardizing the core so that you can spend more time and more of that human intelligence piece being brought in your experience and less of the machine reliance by going after those other things as well. And then reporting on those and having a nice try to have as clean of a testing bed, if you will, for whatever the metric or the tactic you're going after, a group of tactics. That's obviously part of it as well. And then the other piece for us, I think, is to your point, is having it all kind of integrated and being central. So we're trying to build one central unit for that. And now we expose more of the operational, not just tactical and KPIs and metrics, more of like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is what the impact's going to be, and setting that expectation as opposed to just looking after the fact. Again, it's a dynamic process. It's not brands. Yes, growth is great. But there's also the soft skills of the communication and understanding why things worked or didn't work, and communicating that and creating that expectation to the brand. And that's a dynamic process. Some folks just want to know more about the sauce, right? As opposed to just looking at the performance. Or when the performance is down, you got to explain that and teach that. And then it's, the more questions we can answer for them, even outside of our scope, the better. And I feel like that's part of it as well. And we try to do that and have those thought leadership with them as well.
Interesting. And internally, from an agency standpoint, do you use the tools that you have when you gather together as a team, where you're reviewing the metrics on the dashboards as a team, as an executive team, or from an operational standpoint, where everybody has access to the same numbers and the discussions and debates on performance are more objective around results that have been driven versus being more subjective? Any thoughts on that, on how the internal processes are weaved around this?
Yeah, so internally, obviously, the objective is a lot easier with the data being there and standardizing that data so that you have a comparison across each brand that we work with, or each brand that the brand manager works with independently. And then the cross teams will have cross-functional teams will meet, once or twice a week to talk about what they're seeing in trends and what's the impact of this. Because data only tells you what's happened. It doesn't tell you, a lot of times can't tell you why. And if you don't have those event markers on there, it's very difficult. Someone can spin their wheels trying to find out, why did sales pop on this day or drop on this day, or conversion changed or traffic spiked or whatever it may be. Oh, well, we ran a promotion, or hey, we changed the main image on this. So trying to tear down those silos as much as possible is definitely a large part of it. And then trying to tear down those external silos as well. We just switched over to a new project management platform for that reason. There's like, hey, we're doing a lot of different things. We want to kind of give you status updates if you want to, yes, no. And it's just like, how much data, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have to work with the brands to understand how much data they care about and kind of sculpt around that. Some brands are super data intensive and want to know more of, in the weeds. Others are, no, hey, once a month is awesome for a checklist of what's going on. And then if sales are down or whatever may be going down or didn't work as expected, then obviously they want to know why ahead of time. And go from there. But it's definitely dynamic. It's different. Each personality. There's cultures, there's time zones, there's different products. I mean, it's a lot, but it's fun. And that's definitely the fun part, is trying to do that. And I think it shapes us across the organization as well.
Is it fair to say then that your team and yourselves spend more time on investigating the why, because
Mm.
the what is taken care of quickly? So, wherein, as an example, there is a trend. There are, let's say, 20,000 SKUs that you guys are managing. You spot a trend quickly across all of these SKUs. And then the discussion is more around the why and the actions that need to be taken, that rather than being able to spot
Yes.
it itself.
Yes, we try to have as much automation in the why, but obviously things will happen where it's unexpected. Something will again, favorable, unfavorable will happen. Yeah, then you're going in, you're trying to figure out why. And if then we try to figure out, hey, we're constantly having to ask this question or ask this why, and it's a manual process at that point. Then we're like, hey, can we build a view for that? Can we build a report for that? Can we build an alert? Can we be proactive to it,
Right.
or at least reactive whenever it happens? Here's the next 10 things we would check anyways, and here's the report. Again, that's where we're trying to bring that machine learning, the AI in, to kind of do that dynamically. And we can only, as humans, right, digest a certain number of data points. And again, working with large catalogs, it can see more trends, or at least different trends, whether they matter or not. We're trying to figure that out as well. But I would say, yeah, the why is definitely, we want to know why, so we can either replicate or
Yep.
not do it again, right? Hedge it in the future. And
Yep.
then that's what the brand is going to ask. That's the next question they're going to ask. Why did we go up? Why did we go down? Why are we doing this? Why are we not doing that? I feel like that's it's the five whys of it. It's like why to get down to the core. So
Right.
definitely.
And that's where, so in your case, you have your own data warehouse with data piping into your data warehouse in a consolidated manner. So is it fair to say then that because you have your own data warehouse with data from all of the different brands consolidated into a single place, it gives you a lot more control in terms of instrumenting some of these alerting so that, let's say there is a uh, event that happened is unexpected or undesirable, then you have some proactive measures implemented in the data, some sort of alerting setup, custom alerting setup,
Mhm.
so that the next time you catch it earlier and stop the leak rather than dealing with it after the fact.
Yeah, I think going back to your one of your earlier questions, why did we go from out of the box to a custom? And part of it was trying to get more of the why, and we couldn't do it inside the box. And then the other is the pure volume of data that we have. It gets kind of expensive when we go to out of the box solutions. They charge by product, ASIN number of whatever it may be, and that just doesn't work for us. And then to your point, the next layer is, hey, we brands have really specific questions. We need to be able to build something custom for them to answer themselves, as opposed to having to come to our brand managers or, like I said, having that report for someone else, internally or externally, depending on what they're trying to do. And it's really difficult to do that in a, uh, a standard solution, if you will.
Mhm.
And it's also being able to your point, is that control is what's going on, being ahead of it. And, what with that becomes, there's issues, right? There's data management, there's a lot more technical teams, software engineers, technical engineers, data scientists that come with that. And then that's fun for me. That's what I like as well. So that's part of why we have that, as well as to be able to have that control and allow me to have a little sandbox.
You actually brought me to my next question, actually. How do you think about having a data team at an agency? Because do you look at it as a cost of doing business? Do you look at it as we look at data as the highest ROI channel, uh, right? So that's how we look at it. But would be interesting to see how, from an agency's perspective, you think about your data team. It could be a one-person team or it could be a bigger team,
Yeah.
but would love to get your perspectives on it.
Yeah. I think it's definitely changing, and it's something that we sometimes we're pretty in tune with, and other times like, hey, well, what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? And let's try to have like a quarterly or a semi-annual recalibration, if you will. And I think there was a question, more about like what's the first or kind of your order. For us, it's data scientists. It's let's have the data and kind of manipulate it and play around with it in a static environment and build a lightweight report or solution to understand what that is, so we can be more nimble and fast. And then if it makes sense and hey, this works really great for this brand, the brand loved the output. Now let's come back to our more sophisticated team, obviously your team, and let's figure out how to do this in more automated and systematic and at scale across all of the accounts. And I think that's the process for us. And now I have a dedicated data scientist that's assigned to me. I mean, specifically me, all my projects, which is awesome. Keeps me out of Google Sheets. I mean, I still learn, and then, for us, we build these one-off tools, and they're really valuable for us. And then we give those out for free to the folks that visit our website and interact with us, because we know the value that's there. And for the most part, everybody has a very similar question for that, or if they're on different platforms, et cetera. So that's also fun, is to be able to give that back. And so it's not a truly sunk cost for us. And it's a
Right.
lighter weight. It's a more nimble solution for brands that don't have massive data pipelines and et cetera. They can pull a static report, don't need it to be automated at scale across dozens and dozens of brands.
In terms of the teams itself, Mike, I know you do a lot of heavy lifting at Video in terms of the ideation on what you want to have implemented, what you want to see, what is important, what is not important, so on and so forth. Um, when we go to the really, really big agencies, they have a dedicated technical team, data team. Sometimes software engineers are hired and they're doing data engineering work. Sometimes there's a dedicated data team itself. And sometimes we see a single person data team that's in charge of setting up the pipelines, automating every dashboard, so on and so forth, right? At what point in time does hiring a team internally versus having a team manage that infrastructure for you, make sure it is up and running, make sense? Does it make sense for an agency to have, let's say, an agency that's managing less than, I don't know, 100 brands, does it make sense to have an internal data team versus to have a team fully manage that for you? What's your perspective on it?
That's a great question. We had that ourselves, and we kind of we have full circled. So we had basically a quasi or semi internal team, and what our hurdle is, we are on multiple platforms. So you have Amazon, Walmart, Target, Google, and then Shopify and some other platforms pulling in. And, just like the advertising on those platforms for the most part is unique and different. The code, the platform, the APIs, the process, the data is different as well. And we basically had one person, basically like a CTO, fractional CTO for us. And it's just overwhelming, and it's difficult to keep up with all of those if you're the main source, and you have to have a dedicated specialist and a person for each platform and each code to understand that. And that's where we come with you all, because it allows us to do that at scale. It allows us to understand what is going on. We can build IP on top of what you have, which is very helpful for us to keep some of that logic, et cetera. But we get that security for us right now that you also see other agencies and other providers as well. So we're leveraging your data and your mindset as well and scalability for us. And for now, it works for us. I don't know if it's a number. I don't know if it's I would assume it's dollars and cents, right? Once it makes sense. Um, but I like having a deeper bench. I think it's a big part for us. It becomes an HR role whenever we hire internally, and who's going to do that. And then I think it's the credibility. I think it's obviously, I like having, to my point, is having more people involved and asking those questions. Hey, what else are you seeing? Or having those strategic partners, just like we would if, for our brands. So I don't know. We've never really thought about when we'll go, if or when we would come back internally. Uh, I think that it's a pretty significant scale from where we are right now to do that, just because I like how it works. You have a lot of out of the box things that are built, and we can just kind of expand on that, where we had to start from scratch every time we have a new idea. It's starting over. So I think that your speed to launch and speed to creating new views is much faster than if we were in house. And for now, we like the being nimble, and if that's if we got to pay a little more for that, that's okay. Just because of where we're at, it's changing so fast. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I think that for us, there was a certain number of accounts, and it was about the consistency of the data, and the frequency of the data was a big part for us to go from a simple solution to a more custom solution. And then, to your point, I'm just trying to think. I don't have an answer. I don't know when we would go internal. For now, I just keep doing great work, and for the long haul, right?
Yeah. No, great answer. The reason I asked that question is because I asked my question that myself as a tool provider and as a data team provider. For us also, it's a constant question of, especially from the agency side of the house, to what level of engagement
Hmm.
from our standpoint is good. At what point in time do we price ourselves out, or at what point in time do we stop adding value to an agency, right? So those questions keep lingering. So that's where I'm coming from. And one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, as a follow up to what you just mentioned, is what kind of risk does attrition in the data team slash the tech team pose to the initiatives that you might be undertaking in house? Do you
So
look
far,
at it from that lens?
yeah, for now we don't have that. I think we've broken it up enough, and kind of going back to my other answer is, that's why we have you all with a deeper bench to where we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to scramble for that because we are relying on the data so much. We have our internal data science, pretty easy to plug and play and expand and contract as we need. For right now, it's a full expansion. We haven't really had to contract, thankfully.
Right.
um, it So far it's not really a concern with us. And I think that's largely because you all can handle that for us, and having that partnership in place to as we expand, you can expand. And you are more tech savvy than we are in understanding what skill set, where to find the skills, and the talent pool. It's not something we do on a regular basis. So we trust you guys for that as well. And I think it's how it works, and that's probably why we don't have to think about that. So thanks.
Got it. Got it. Understood. Mike, I don't know whether this will go on the podcast or not, but I'll ask anyway. Right?
Okay.
Internally, we are a company that builds data solutions, but every now and then I come back thinking we are just not as data savvy as we want our customers to be. We need to be more data centric
Mm.
because that makes discussions internally a lot more objective, and that also meant that the culture in the company is not just around giving insights and building data solutions for customers, but also should be ingrained in each individual within Saras, right? And that requires some amount of time and effort and investment of resources into making that transition happen. Well, even if transition might be a strong word, but to keep improving in that area, right? We have to think about it right from the time of onboarding, reinforcing that in every single opportunity that we get. So, from an agency perspective, when you're looking for hiring people into the team, or when you're looking at improving the performance on a particular account,
Hmm.
how do you, uh, how do you be objective and how do you drive that culture of being data driven at the agency? I know you are,
Yeah.
but from an agency level, how do you make sure that that happens?
Well, part of it is to kind of level that playing field as much as possible and making it where we're answering as many questions for whoever's working on the brand, internal, external, through automation and simplicity, and then giving them that freedom and the autonomy to look at the data their own ways and kind of spin it up and collaborate. Hey, brand asked for this, and I didn't really know where to find this or how I would do it. I was thinking this. Do we have this? Yes, no. Okay, and no, then we kind of dig into it, and it gets put into our queue to bring in and see. Hey, are there other brands that could benefit from this? Yes, then we incorporate it. So it's more about giving them the freedom to ask the questions and to think and have that, and answering the core questions for them, so they don't have to waste their time and resources and energy on that. When we do test for data literacy, if you will, do you know where to find this? Do you understand what this is? There's a couple of tests before you even get to communicate or submit your application with us. I mean, it's pretty basics.
Mhm.
And our role is heavy data centric and communicative. And then the other piece is, and I think this is, to what you're speaking to, is more consultative. It's reporting on performance is great, pretty easy. We can do that from a technology stack that we have, and as I'm talking about, trying to build more of that automation. But the other is, what's next? What is the data not telling us? Where else can we go that we haven't told the data to look? What is a new features coming out, new reports coming out? What do we do with that? Should we do that? Should we not do that? So giving them that freedom to kind of communicate within themselves and obviously with the team. I think that's the big part is in the culture of a collaborative culture and this our way or no way. I think that we're not like that. We want to have that collaborative input and because everybody thinks differently. Everybody has different backgrounds, whether they've been in another agency or they've been in another marketplace or kind of fresh and just coming fresh out of a school or a program that we've had for and been able to mold. And I love that. We've just hired 5 or 6 new people in the last month that are kind of supporting our advertising team. And most of them are a little more green to Amazon advertising specifically. And they have tons of questions
Yeah.
and they're asking questions that we haven't asked ourselves in years, right? Like, oh, okay, this is something we forgot about, or we can come back to doing that. And then obviously trying to answer as many of those internally so we can get them to accelerate. um, we are talking right now about how much, I don't say bad habits or good habits, but how much experience should they have? What is the right blend of experience and viewpoints from again other agencies or wherever they worked previously, or do we want someone that's kind of brand new and we can mold and shape them? To your point, that's it's harder work, it's a longer timeline,
Yeah.
and then we're pretty impactful on their career and developing their career. So it's definitely a balance. For us working with again larger brands, mid 7, mid 8 figure established brands, we do have to have a certain level of seniority to be able to just communicate to the brands, and that can be expensive for us. It could be expensive for the brand, and we're trying to figure that out to understand what is that right mix from day one. To your point, it's bring them in. So now we're trying to bring them in behind the scenes for longer than we used to. We used to release them out to the customer faster than maybe we should have. I'm not really sure if we haven't figured that part out. but we want to give them that confidence, right, before they have the pressure from the brand. Because nobody likes a disgruntled brand or customer asking questions, and the brand manager can't answer those questions. So we want to give them that confidence first. I think that's been huge for us. Is run a mock internally. Is hey, here's 5 or 6 questions that brands are going to ask that I would want to ask you if you're reporting to me on that, and just kind of running through those trials as well. I know that's a longer answer, but it's kind of how we
No,
think about it as well. It's a little soft skills, soft side.
interesting. Thank you for that, Mike.
Yeah.
Um, so wrapping up, from a personal insight standpoint, what advice would you give agencies uh, that are thinking about their own data stack? Because there are many things, right? The technology selection, the team selection, whether when I say team, it's either hiring internally or it's finding a vendor that can support you. The cost is a big factor as well.
Yeah.
How much customization do you need to have? Because there's no end to how much customizations
Yeah.
one can do on a data initiative, right? So, what advice would you give someone who is considering uh, having their own data stack?
You that's a loaded question, and I think when we go back to, as I mentioned earlier, we found how to be nimble and also be able to scale. So what it really boils down to is we got a new view or data set or pipeline, whatever it may be that we're looking at, and then at first we just try to do it static, and then the question we ask ourselves is how often do we need to report on this? How often do we need to think about this? Obviously our brands have at least one monthly touch point from a end of month reporting perspective. Is that enough, or does it need to be weekly? Does it need to be daily? Does it need to be intraday?
Hmm.
Does it need to be more sophisticated, more detailed? Is it just a report? Is it just statistics? Is there also questions? And I think that's the big thing for us is the cadence, and then the complexity of it. How many different, it depends on, for us, we have multiple different data sources, different platforms, and we have to aggregate and pull that together. And that adds complexity to it really quickly when you're pulling in different things. And then the next layer is how large is that data you're pulling? Is it, and then one thing that I've had to learn and realize that is how dirty is the data, how commingled is the data. Each platform is very unique in that. And then what we found out is instead of having to try to decipher and scrub and clean the data later, it's how can we do it on the front end with the way that we set up our campaign structure or our ad groups or the way our naming conventions to
Hmm.
make the data that much easier to report on. I mean, we were just working with your team, I think yesterday, or I guess earlier today, and there's a naming convention that's inside of the product, and then there's a product category node, and this makes it cleans the data so fast as opposed to trying to figure out a super complex way of splitting the data, marrying the data, and bringing it back. And I think that's the questions that we ask. And again, I think cadence is definitely our number one, and then the size of the data, the amount of the
And
data.
the cadence can change, right? You might start off working with a customer on a
Yeah,
monthly cadence call, and then it might quickly grow into a weekly cadence call. And
yeah,
now suddenly, I'm assuming your brand marketers are
yeah,
spending time preparing for that meeting a
yeah,
couple of hours every week. And that
yeah.
can be quite productive, I would assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we found out, I have a little bit of a trading background, and looking at moving averages was pretty impactful. Whether it be 180, like a large moving average versus a monthly versus a weekly, and what we realized is that smoothing the data over a 7-day moving average has been really impactful for us, and not being knee jerk, and the brands realizing, hey, it's a week, like let's see, a couple of days down, a couple of days up, and it kind of levels out at the end of the week. And then the second part is year over year. We're always trying to look at year over year. A lot of brands and have historically looked at month over month. And I know that some of the more larger brands that have been in the space for longer will know, like, hey, this is kind of a slow time of year. This is a high time of year. But the hard part is looking at the product level
Hmm.
year over year, and we're obviously working that right now. A lot of brands that we have the data for, that we've been working with for years, makes it easy. But when you connect a new brand, most of the platforms you can only go back, at least on the advertising or some of the data, only can go back granular for the products at 60 to 90 days. So it makes it hard to do a year over year. It takes 10 months before you can do a year over year. So now it's trying to work on that as well. I got a little bit of a tangent on there, but that's just there's so many tangents to this, right? So many different ways you can look at this stuff.
Got it. Got it. Lastly, I know you've been excited about generative AI,
Mhm.
uh, and there is recent news that people can buy uh, on TikTok and get products delivered by Amazon. I don't know. In India, TikTok is banned, but in the US, I don't know if that feature is live yet. I'm assuming that would force some changes to your data stack if some of your brands are leveraging that functionality. But anything with the recent technical trends that you're very excited about?
You know, yes and no. So one, yeah, the platform, and that's fairly recently released, and they Amazon and TikTok haven't figured out their attribution. It's really difficult when you use a link in the back end, and once it comes from TikTok over to Amazon, you lose it. So you don't really know what's going on. But I think it was Bezos actually that one of his early mantras and comments was, hey, a lot of people are focused on the trend and what's next. And he really wanted to focus on what's going to be here forever or for the next 10 years. What's not going somewhere. Let's
Yeah,
build on that. So to that point, AI is going to be here. It's how do we build that AI? How do we scale that AI? And how are we able to bolt on and off the new things that are coming quickly, as opposed to trying to do everything at once or looking at everything. It's like I've mentioned earlier. It's like, hey, we have the large data sets. How can we increase the efficiency of managing the data set? How can we increase the efficiency of analyzing the data set? And then how can the machine give us a different perspective, give us a different point of view, and really, that we can either train the model or untrain the model and kind of ask questions to it and interact with it as a more conversational tone to make it easier for the
mhm,
entire team to train. I mean, that's what GPT did was, hey, let's have some communication, and get some semantics involved. And how do you ask questions and think about things? Because the machine was trained by, a certain team, right? And certain different semantics or certain set of semantics. So um, to that, if you're not getting involved in AI and at least staying in tune with what it is, and thinking about how to integrate it, you'll get left behind. I mean, we're already there. You're seeing Amazon's pushing out, automatic updates to the copy. I think it goes live in 2 or 3 days, to where if you're using emojis and other things in your copy, it's going to automatically update and change. There's a big shift from
yeah,
keywords.
yeah,
Yes, keywords are still important. There's more of a conversational and answering, situational questions. How would I use this product, like a lifestyle question? And then your images. A lot of brands have not really focused on images historically. They'll sling up product in a couple of simple images, but now people are, very visually stimulated and have questions. And if you have quality visual content, one, it helps the shopper answer questions faster. And the second is now they're scraping the images, and they're incorporating that into that. It's getting indexed based on what is or is not in the image. So the more you can answer in that, I think that's where we are going now. We've been playing around with Amazon recognition for a little while. What does it scrape? What's the capacity? And how does Amazon take that into consideration? So that's
yeah.
our more recent shiny object, if you will.
Interesting. I'm assuming with the AI stuff, the pace of change on Amazon will also probably increase. Uh, Maybe the listing might new images might be added, let's say once a week as opposed to once in a month.
Yeah.
The content on the listing might change more frequently,
Mhm.
depending on what the algorithms are learning, and therefore I would also assume that the analysis might end up being a lot more frequent as well as the numbers move up and down more frequently, right? And I'm sure you're well positioned to, adjust to that pace of change.
Yeah, and I'm actually excited about that. I think it takes a little bit of the advantage away from us, at least on certain aspects. A lot of brands will come and they're not dynamically testing copy or
Yeah.
images or pricing or anything. And now Amazon's like, hey, we have a lot of data, and we think you should add this image or add this to your image. We've given you some recommendations in the past, and you still haven't added it. Well, guess what? Now we're going to do it. So I, I I think that's what's happened is Amazon sits on a lot more data than we can. Obviously, they only give us a
Mhm.
small sliver of
Yeah.
that, and they're
Yeah.
basically saying, "Hey, we see a lot of brands that I mean, Amazon's goal is to make money, right? So if they see an opportunity to increase the conversion, increase the click through rate, and push a product a certain direction, and they think they can help the seller, they're going to do that. And then the other side is, I don't want them to control my listings. They're gonna jack it up, and they will. Things are going to happen. They've been messing up listings since they started, right?
Yeah.
We'll get delisted or whatever for random reasons, or they'll tag a category in the wrong, like a hazard policy, and pull all the products down, and it's a whole mess. So um, I do think that will have a little more uniformity and standardization of the shopping and customer experience on the platform. Just like Google doing updates to its SERP and some other things, and
Mm-hmm.
getting away from the stuffing
Yeah.
and the cramming, because Walmart has pretty much since day one has been pretty strict on um, their quality listing quality score and style guides by category. Basically it's brand, product, feature, this, and that's it. You can't stuff it. You can't. It's very simple and clean. It's got to focus on the images and get them to click through the product, and then you can start to educate them and guide them. And I think Amazon is taking. I honestly think they're taking a little bit of a page out of Walmart's book for that. Target as well, a little more standardized. So I like where it's going. They've been sitting on the data. I mean, it's a massive report. Their Cosmo report is pretty long. It's insightful. And I think the big thing from that report was, I'm going to butcher this, but it's a sliver of a percentage that they could increase their revenue as a result of this. And that across billions of dollars is a
Yeah.
really big lift.
Yeah.
And the cost to implement that, they're like, we already have the data. Why don't we just implement it and make more money? So can't blame them for it. And then I think again it's just standardization. I like that. I do like that for a platform, and creating that shopper experience, and kind of helping brands that are just getting started and don't really know what's going on and don't have the wherewithal or the capital to invest in someone that knows how to do it on the platform, and they sling something up and they don't have success. I think we'll have newer products doing better than they used to. I think that we'll have newer products not doing as good as they used to,
Right.
because you can't hack the system. It's kind of it'll be interesting, for sure. And we're just at the beginning of it. Very
Absolutely.
very early in the curve.
Absolutely. We are excited about the trend on the AI front for sure. And I'm hoping we can unlock a few things for you along the way as well, Mike. So thanks a lot for the insight. It was lovely chatting with you. For those who are listening to the video, Mike, if someone wants to reach out to you, if a brand wants to reach out to you, how would they get in touch?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So obviously on LinkedIn, but more directly, we have an 8-figure toolkit. Again, those tools I mentioned earlier that we've built, the one-off tools, and we give them to folks that come to our webpage. Obviously, your listeners can have access to that. It's just adverio.io/podcast. And the resource will be sitting there for you. You can obviously go to our download resources section as well. That's another way to get a hold of it. Look forward to connecting and revisiting in the future.
Awesome. Mike, thank you. Lovely chatting with you. Hope to talk to you soon. You done? Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time. Mike, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.